All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Gorowski, and I'll be your host for today. A little reminder to everybody who's tuning in live today, we have just released a new newsletter. It should be in your inboxes now, and it is jam-packed with live events that we have coming up over the next few weeks. There's also a really cool contest to design the challenge coin for the Explorers Club and their World Ocean Week event, which is coming up in June. So if you head over and check out exploringbytheseat.com, you can find all those events. You can find that contest as well. You can also find that newsletter in your inboxes. And we have a really cool event tomorrow we're really excited about. Some of you may know that the Endurance Ernest Shackleton ship was found last year in the Weddell Sea. We broadcast a lot of events live from the search for that ship. And it's a year on, and we're connecting with key expedition members tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern to recount all the findings and new learnings from the 3D scanning and things like that. So you don't want to miss out on that. All right, we are connecting for another one of our Mountain Parks Peak Discovery Series live events. You have been joining us for months already as we've gone on exciting virtual education programs live from Jasper, Waterton Lakes, Banff, Kootenay, Glacier, and Yoho National Parks. Each program has been sharing a unique story and gives a look behind the scenes at these amazing places with Parks Canada experts. These fun and interactive presentations have explored topics like wildlife conservation, archaeological history, protecting at-risk species, and so much more. And today we're going to dive into a little look at climate change and the impacts that is having. And we have an amazing team to do it for us live today. We've got Marian and Sabrina joining us backstage, educators with Parks Canada. I'm going to bring them in front and center. How are we doing today?
Good, thanks.
Good, thanks, Joe.
Good. Well, it's great to have you joining us live today. We have a jam-packed group with us. We've got a ton of classrooms on camera with us. We have classrooms joining us via the live chat. I can see groups saying hi there already. So we have a lot to do, but Marian and Sabrina, I'm going to let you get things rolling. I've got a little video ready to go as well. It should be a lot of fun today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Marian.
And I'm Sabrina.
And we are lucky enough to work as educators at the Palisades Stewardship Education Center here in Jasper National Park.
Jasper National Park is located in the Canadian Rocky Mountains and has been home to people for thousands of years.
That's right. Jasper is located in Treaty 6 and 8 territory, as well as the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Assiniboine-Winewak, Daneza, Nehiyawak, Secwepem, Mountain Métis, and Métis. We acknowledge the past, present, and future generations of these nations who continue to steward the land.
And today, you're going to be joining us on an adventure in our other jobs as detectives.
That's right.
So we recently had a really tough case where we kind of had to go all over the national park to take a look and uncover clues, find evidence to help us solve what's been happening with climate change. So let's take a look at that now. It was a dull day at the office. No calls, no emergencies, no crimes. For two detectives, we were bored stiff. So, when a suspicious call came through, asking for us, we took it with no hesitation.
Hello?
Is this the Palisades Detective Agency?
Yes, you've got the right place. What can we do for you?
I'd like to report some disappearances.
Hey, we might have something here. Listen. What sort of disappearances? We're going to need more details to open an investigation.
Let's start with your name.
This is Mother Nature calling. My glaciers are melting. My trees are suffering. Birds, bugs, and beasts. They're all feeling the effects of a changing climate. I am used to the world warming and cooling, but it seems that everything is so much faster these days. Am I losing my mind? I need your help. Is the climate really warming up faster than usual? And is there anything being done to save my poor babies? I do not have money for gas or expenses. That is something you humans invented. But I do have some sunshine and raindrops. Please. Please help.
That does sound like something we can tackle, but if we can't go far, we'll have to stick around Jasper National Park and some of the other national parks nearby.
Do you have any leads for us? Jasper National Park is pretty big, and any help you can give us will get us in the right direction.
Start with the glaciers. Then look to the tree line, to the whitebark pines. Find the clues that show the climate is really heating up. Oh, my call is ending. I'm running out of time.
Hello?
Well, that sounds pretty important. No money, but I do like sunshine and raindrops.
And as they say, it's no time like the present to look at the glaciers.
Well, we better get out there and start an investigation. That was all the information we had to go on, but we were curious and decided to see for ourselves about this claim. We headed up to the Athabasca Glacier to search for clues.
Oh wow! Look at the size of that glacier!
Yeah.
I don't see any evidence that it's disappearing.
No, it looks pretty stable and cold from here.
I mean, I'm even frozen solid on a day like today.
I hear ya. Maybe we should
Take a closer look.
take a closer look. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Take a look. Do you see any evidence of climate change?
Ah, what did I trip over?
You mean this massive blue thing here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look, a date.
Oh, thank you. My snacks.
Your snacks. The date on this blue thing here. It says the glacier was here in 1908. Whoa.
But the glacier's all the way back there, up above that little hill.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well,
I think we just stumbled on our first clue.
ugh. Cool it with the jokes. Actually, I might know a glaciologist, someone who studies glacier for a living.
Do you think they could answer our questions, or at least some of them, so we could figure out what's going on with the disappearing glacier?
Maybe I'll give them a call and see if they can come join us over here.
That sounds like a good idea.
Maybe in the meantime, we'll take a closer look.
Sounds good. Oh, off we go.
Man, I don't know where this expert is. Have you seen them?
I wonder where they are. They said they'd be here.
Where? There's so many hills here. What's happening?
I don't know.
Oh, I think I see something.
Oh!
Oh, detectives!
Hi!
I'm here. I came as soon as you called.
Oh, perfect.
Come on up.
Marian, I'd like you to meet my acquaintance.
Hi!
How are you?
Good. Oh, we're hugging.
Oh, hi. How are you? So good to be here today.
Yeah, great.
Hi, IC Peaks, was it?
That's right.
Oh, well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. So we stumbled, literally in my case, across some clues earlier about the melting and the disappearance of the glacier. And we were wondering if you might have any other clues that you can show us around here.
Yes, I do actually. Now, if you look at the glacier as it is today, it looks like it's in good shape, doesn't it? Well, actually, in reality, the clues that we're looking for are surrounding the glacier. If you looked at these buildups of rocks on the front and the sides, these are also known as moraines. And moraines are created when glaciers are melting, they're moving and they're carrying rocks in their travel, sometimes for hundreds of kilometers.
Wow. Hey, I hope they remember their passports.
Ah, that's a good one.
I like this one.
So, changes in glaciers can only be seen over a long period of time?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yes. You really have to go back in time to see the difference and understand how this glacier's changed over time.
Wow.
We have pictures from the Athabasca Glacier dating from more than 100 years ago.
What?
Yeah, that show the size of the glacier then compared to today. And if you look down here at this indicator, it shows you where the glacier used to be in 1925. So compared to where it's at now,
Whoa.
and if you look up ahead a little bit, you will see another marker where our friend's waving there, showing where the glacier used to be in 1908.
So, if we went back in time to 1908, we'd be standing on the glacier right now?
Absolutely.
Whew. What happened?
The world get too hot to handle? Wait. It's made of ice. Wouldn't it just build up over the winter months?
Yeah, you would think so. And yes, glaciers do get bigger during the winter, but it takes a lot of snow building up to form a glacier. When the snow is deep enough, it gets heavy that the snow at the bottom squishes down and forms ice.
Wow, that must take a lot of snow accumulating to build that kind of ice.
It does. It usually takes about 50 meters over the course of several years to build up. These days, it's getting warmer in the summer months, and so things are melting faster than before, and the buildup of snow isn't keeping up.
So what's causing these glaciers to melt faster?
Well, although glacier melting is a natural process, they've been melting a lot faster for at least 150 years or so. The amount of greenhouse gases and carbon in the atmosphere has increased due to burning fossil fuel. And so these gases cause changes in the climate.
Sounds like a pretty hot topic.
It is, you're not wrong. Glaciers continue to melt throughout the winter as well. There's no water usually on top, but there's always a little bit of spring water at the bottom of the glaciers. Today, the toe of the Athabasca Glacier, or the front of the glacier, recedes at an average rate of about 5 meters a year. At this pace, it could be completely gone by 2100. And as the Earth's average temperature continues to increase, this rate will get faster and faster. All of this from just 1 degree rise in temperature. Imagine what could happen if it gets up to 1.5 or even 2 degrees.
Whew. That's a pretty good evidence so far, but is this the only glacier being affected by climate change? I mean, we're going to need more than one big melting block of ice to prove a disappearance, I think.
Well, and that's fair. But however, this is not just happening to the Athabasca Glacier, it's happening to glacier all over the world.
Whoa.
Yes, and actually, let's look at something else for more evidence. When I began my career, I was working on the Illecillewaet Glacier, and I can speak to that one as well.
Okay.
So let's look at pictures, and I can show you.
Sure. Do you have videos and pictures?
I do. I have both.
Awesome. Let's
Here.
take a look.
The Illecillewaet Glacier is pretty special. We have images of this glacier all the way back to 1887 when the Vaux family first came across it. They were originally from Philadelphia and took some great photos of the glacier while on vacation. On their next visit in 1894, they were so astounded by the amount the glacier had changed and melted that as a family, they spent the next 10 years returning and taking pictures from marked locations to document how much ice was lost. Their annual dedication to this project has given us so much information on glaciers that some of their findings and photographic techniques are still being used today. And they are considered the first glaciologists in North America.
Our clues are really racking up here. What else can you tell us about Glacier National Park and the Illecillewaet Glacier in particular that relates to climate change?
Yeah, I can tell you a bit more. Well, today, Mount Revelstoke National Park and Glacier National Park have 129 glaciers between the two of them. Now that's a lot of ice. But less than 40 years ago, there used to be 337. And for those of you who like to think in percentages, that's a 61.7% loss of glaciers in only 40 years.
Sounds a bit doomy and gloomy if you ask me.
Yeah, glaciers are melting and no longer at a glacial pace.
Yeah, well, don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. The silver lining is that all of the evidence that we are able to gather from glaciers over the years has given scientists clear examples of climate change. It's also spurring countries around the world to take action.
So, is there anything that we can do as individuals to help stop this?
Yeah, well, we can't really stop it from happening, and it is a natural process, right? Although it is happening a lot faster than it should be. The most we can do now is monitor and figure out how to help plants, animals, and humans that rely on the rivers and meltwater these glaciers provide.
So, a lot more planning for the future?
Yep. One good thing is that these rivers aren't completely fed by the glaciers. In 2009, Jocelyn Hyrose did a study on the Illecillewaet Glacier to see how much water coming off was from the glacier ice and how much came from snowmelt each year. And after a number of years of studying meltwater, she concluded that approximately 66% comes from snow and only 34% actually comes from the glacier meltwater.
Okay, so what's the problem? The rivers will just be a little bit lower than normal, right?
Maybe, but another thing that glaciers do is they act like a refrigerator for the snow. Without glaciers, scientists have predicted that not as much snow will be able to build up over the winter months, meaning there would be less snow melting in the spring and summer for these rivers.
I don't know about you, but that's a lot of evidence we've gotten so far. I'd say we're ready to move on and take a look at our next example.
Yeah, I think we better branch out and look at the white bark pine. Get it? Branch out?
Marian.
Gosh, it was sure nice of the chief to give us a day off to go skiing.
He didn't. We're up here to look for white bark pines.
Oh. Well, at least you could still use the chairlift. I wouldn't have wanted to walk all this way.
I'm with you there. Next week we get to figure out why our weird caller sent us all the way high into the mountains. But
Yeah.
I don't see any evidence of climate change around here.
Well, do you know anything about white bark pine?
Nope. Do you?
Nope.
I guess we'll be looking up an expert. Let's check out our phone here.
Yeah. Oh, how about this one? Leaf Barkley, expert in plants, house plants. Nope.
Not quite. There's one. What about Connie Fir? Oh, expert in spruce, not white bark pine.
Oh, hey, Ian Reed, expert in white bark pine, and he works right here in Jasper National Park.
It's perfect. Let's see if he's up for video call.
All right. Hi, is this Ian, the white bark pine expert?
Yeah, it sure is. I'm terrifically happy you called.
Can you tell us what white bark pine trees look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things to look for. They live right at the top of the tree line, high up in mountain environments. Their needles are dark green and they grow in clumps of 5. I don't know if you can see this on the webcam, but each little cluster has 5 needles, just like that.
Hey, I think I found one. Look at these needles. They're in bundles of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And from a distance, sometimes the trees look like broccoli. So they're very bushy and they have very spread out branches. And the cones are egg-shaped, dark purple. They're tightly closed and they require a bit of extra help to remove the seeds from a very special bird called the Clark's nutcracker. And I'll show you some cones here. So they're very tightly packed. These ones have been sitting in the freezer. Here's another one.
Why are these trees so important?
Yeah, they're important for a lot of reasons for the subalpine environment. So whitebark pine are a keystone species, meaning that many other species depend on them for survival, and they have a really important role in the ecosystem. They're also a pioneer species, so that means they're the first to grow and first to establish in the harsh mountain environment, and they provide shelter for other trees and plants to grow. They're also an important food source for squirrels, birds, and even grizzly bears. And the tree helps reduce the speed of snowmelt in the spring because it shades the snow, so it prevents large floods from happening. And whitebark pine also helps to stabilize steep mountain slopes and prevent erosion. And lastly, it takes the tree around 30 to 50 years before they even begin to produce cones, and they won't be fully mature until they're about 60 to 80 years old.
I'm sorry, 60 to 80 years old before they mature? That's a lot of teenage angst.
Oh, telling me. They sound pretty important for these areas of mountains, but what do they have to do with climate change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, whitebark pine trees are actually directly threatened by climate change, but they're also threatened by white pine blister rust, mountain pine beetles, and forest fires. So, whitebark pine is found between a rock and hard place, meaning that where it is currently found is becoming unsuitable due to climate change. And because whitebark pine is found at tree line and often on steep slopes really high up in the mountains, it can't move very quickly higher up in elevation because it's so rocky and there's no soil. Also, species from lower down, like lower elevation trees, are starting to move higher up and grow into whitebark pine habitat. And the climate is changing faster than these trees can move and adapt, and that's causing a lot of challenges.
These trees are pining for colder temperatures in the summer.
Yeah, exactly. So white pine blister rust, though, doesn't have much to do with climate change, but it is the biggest threat to the species. It was introduced in the early 1900s, and only about 1% of whitebark pine trees in North America are resistant to the fungus. And it attacks the bark and tubes inside of the trees that transport water and nutrients. And climate change is also creating these really hot and dry and long summers, which are increasing the number of forest fires and the frequency of forest fires. And because whitebark pine trees take so long to mature, and healthy trees are really hard to come by, there's very few of them, forest fires are a major threat. And mountain pine beetle is also directly affected by climate change. So warmer winters have allowed the beetles to spread higher up in elevation and further north. So they're more often affecting whitebark pine trees than in the past.
They're really bugging the trees and making it hard for them to branch out.
I can't believe how immature you are.
You can't believe it?
Oh my god.
Are you two still even paying attention?
Sorry. Yeah, keep going.
Okay,
What can stop the mountain pine beetles?
that's a great question. So mountain pine beetles don't do really well in excessively cold weather or in wet climates. So when we have really wet summers and really cold winters, especially a long period of cold weather in the winter, not enough of the young pine beetles survive to get into the healthy trees.
What is Parks Canada doing to protect these trees?
So that's where people like me, resource management officers, come in. So one thing we do is research to find trees that have a natural defense against white pine blister rust. And these trees are usually able to survive in areas where a lot of the other trees are dead. And we attach these bags, these plastic pouches onto the trees that contain a smelly chemical that tells mountain pine beetle that the tree is full of beetles already, so they won't attack it. And using this technique, we were able to save about 80% of rust-resistant trees that we targeted.
Wow, 80%? Definitely on the honor roll for that technique.
Yeah, and secondly, with those special rust-resistant trees, we climb all the way to the top of them in the spring, and we put cages around the cones. And I brought a cage here with me, and they look like this. They're made out of wire mesh, and they're kind of a rectangle shape. And we put them over top of the cones and squeeze the bottom, and that's to protect the cones from being eaten by birds and squirrels, to give the seeds time to mature in the summer. And then we go back in the fall to collect the seeds once they're fully mature. So we have to climb the trees twice. And these seeds are then sent to a nursery to be grown for about 2 years. And once the 2-year-old seedlings are ready, we find places for whitebark pine that are suitable and we plant them. And so far in Jasper National Park, we've planted over 22,000 trees. And throughout the 7 mountain parks, we've planted over 80,000 trees.
Wow, that's incredible. Is there anything else that you're doing for the trees as well?
Yeah, so another thing we're doing for whitebark pine is to get rid of some of the competition. So whitebark pine trees love the sun and they need a lot of space to grow. So as the temperatures increase around the world, more and more trees and plants are able to survive higher up on the mountains. And this is bad news for whitebark pine trees because they do need lots of space and they're also very slow growers, so they don't compete well with the other trees. And to combat this, we're doing controlled burns in places where whitebark pine trees have a good chance of surviving. And if it is unsafe to use fire, we can also do something called mechanical thinning. And we use chainsaws to thin out other trees that are taking over the whitebark pine areas.
Okay. Well, thanks for the information, Ian. We learned a lot about how climate change is affecting whitebark pine.
Yeah, and everything that Parks Canada is doing to help save this keystone species.
I've got one final question for you. What's your
Mhm.
favorite interesting fact or facts about whitebark pine?
Yeah, definitely. So you'll often find whitebark pine growing in these big clusters of trees. So you might see a group of whitebark pine trees, maybe up to 10 or 15 stems, all growing together. And the reason for that is because the Clark's nutcracker, the bird that opens the cones up and spreads the seeds, will cache the seeds in the ground, and they often forget about these seeds. And that's why whitebark pine trees grow. So you'll see these caches of seeds that have sprouted and a lot of trees growing in one cluster.
Awesome. That's a pretty great, interesting fact. Well, thanks again for joining us today, and hopefully we're able to find a few more whitebark pine trees out here.
Thank you, Ian.
Bye.
All right. Well, let's bring you back in.
Yeah. So we've learned a fair amount. Let's do we go over our evidence and sort of sum up what we've discovered so far?
Yeah, okay. So we know that glaciers are melting, and although it's a natural process, we have a lot of photographs to show that they've been melting at a much faster pace for at least 150 years.
That's right. And as far as the whitebark pine trees, well, we learned that they're a keystone species and they play an important role in the mountain ecosystems.
But their environment has been changing, and not so much in a positive way. Forest fires are more likely to affect them. They have both bugs and fungus attacking them as well.
But Parks Canada is doing a lot to help save the trees, though. They're using controlled fires and thinning to allow pines access to the sunlight. They've planted over 22,000 seedlings in Jasper alone and over 80,000 across the mountain parks, so that people in the future and the animals as well that benefit from these trees can continue to do so.
That's very true. I guess Mother Nature was correct. We're definitely seeing signs of change all around us due to climate change, but Parks Canada has been doing a pretty great job working hard to monitor and protect the natural world.
Yeah, and every little thing that we do helps. It's important to do our part and help wherever we can.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that was a pretty solid investigation.
I think so.
And I'm looking forward to hearing some questions from our audience.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get those questions going. Thank you for that solid investigation and some of it braving those elements that looked a little windy, a little chilly out there for some of those scenes.
It was pretty chilly.
All right. And as an added bonus, we have Ian Reed hanging out backstage, Resource Management Officer with Parks Canada. So we'll bring him in. His face will be familiar from a little bit earlier in that investigation. And let's start meeting some of our students. So if you're tuning in via YouTube, use the chat sidebar. Send us in some of your questions. But for now, let's start visiting some of our camera classrooms and let's get some of their questions. So to start us off, let us go to our grade 6s. We have some grade 6s hanging out with Miss Kaniski. How are we doing today, grade 6s? Give me a big wave if you can hear me okay. There they are. All right. Are you guys ready? Do you have a question for us?
I think they might be muted.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There
Hey,
they are.
we're
Hey,
here.
grade sixes.
What can we do for you? Which question would you like?
Yeah, we're just checking in. Does anybody have a question about what we just learned about, what we just saw? We can also come back your way, give you some time to get a question ready. All right, we'll do that. Let's go to another classroom here. This time we are going to go to a classroom, grade 7 and 8, joining us in Ontario. Let's bring them in front and center here. Miss Ratnakumar's crew. How are we doing today? You guys hear and see us okay? If you got a question for us, go ahead. There they are.
Hi.
Hey, everyone.
How are you guys doing today?
Good, thanks.
We're good. We're good. Who's got a question for us?
Stop. How'd you guys? After the what?
Okay.
Why are the pine cones purple?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I'm not really sure what the answer to that is, but probably something to do with the genetics of the tree, and they evolved that way for some advantageous reason. But yeah, I actually don't know the answer.
All right.
To look coolest.
Maybe.
Yeah, to look good.
Let's go to another one of our live classrooms. This time we'll go to Alberta. We've got some third graders hanging out with us. Let's bring them in front and center. There they are, our awesome grade threes. How are we doing, grade threes?
Can you hear us?
We got you loud and clear.
Awesome. Thanks for having us too. This has been awesome. So we have Finley here. He has a question. Finn, stand on up. You can ask your question.
How are forest fires made?
Oh,
How are forest fires? What causes the forest fires? Well, there's a few different causes, and some of them are natural, like lightning strikes. And that actually happened in Jasper National Park last year. There was a lightning strike that caused a fire, and some fires are human caused as well. Whether that's from leaving your campfire unattended, which is very important that you do not do. You always make sure that you have someone around to keep watch on your campfire. Whether it's people who smoke, dropping cigarette butts, that can start fires as well.
Mm-hmm.
can we ask one more?
Of course, go for it.
All right, Grayson, go for it.
Why does the glacier take so long to move? Is it the ice that makes them move?
That's a really good question. So glaciers are sometimes really, really big. So if you can imagine a really big chunk of ice trying to move quickly, it doesn't happen. That's not always the case, though. There is a glacier in Greenland that moves in the summer up to 40 meters a day, which is pretty fast for a big chunk of ice.
Yeah, and sometimes what causes the movement is the different temperatures between the ice and the ground level. So if it's warm enough, then it slides very, very slowly because it is ice.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also melts at the bottom because there's so much pressure pushing down on that ice. Kind of like when you're skating on your skates, you actually melt a tiny layer of ice in the bottom of your skates, and that's what allows you to move.
Very, very cool. All right, awesome threes. Great questions. We might have time to come visit you again, but before we do that, we've got some grade fours here hanging out with us. Okay. How are we doing, grade fours?
Good.
Okay, ask your question.
So, what is the biggest a pine cone can get? How cold can the waters get there?
Sorry, what was the second question?
How cold can the winters get?
Yeah, so first question, the pine cones can get up to about 10 centimeters long, so not very big. Yeah, only 10 centimeters. And then for how cold the winters can get here, well, in my experience, about minus 45 is the coldest I've experienced in Jasper, so pretty cold, yeah.
Are white bark pine trees rare?
Yeah, they're not as common as some other trees. You can only find them really high up in the mountains in these very specific areas. So, and they're dying quite quickly from disease and pine beetles. So they're becoming even more rare as time goes on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What is the benefit of a controlled fire?
What's the benefit of a controlled fire?
Yeah.
All sorts of things. So fire is actually a natural part of our ecosystem, but for hundreds of years it was being suppressed. So fires can regenerate the forest by clearing space to allow other plants that need more sunlight to grow. It also clears out some of the older trees that are more actually weak to the pine beetle infestation. It puts nutrients back into the soil to allow plants to grow and berries for the animals to eat. And there are some trees where the cones can't even open unless they're exposed to enough heat. So some trees need fire, or at least really warm temperatures, for the cones to basically be able to open and disperse the seeds.
Thank you.
All right. That was a great series of questions. Thanks so much, grade 4s. A lot of thinking going on in that classroom. Very cool. Let's check back in with our grade 6s from the beginning and see if they have a question on deck. How's it going, grade 6s?
Hello. Good.
All right. You got any questions on deck there?
Kira, go ahead.
What is the estimated year that the Great Glaciers will be fully melted?
That is a really good question. And that is a question that we actually don't know the answer to, because what happens in the earth is we actually have a pattern that we go through warming and cooling temperatures. So every around 10,000 years, they've estimated that there is an ice age, and we're actually overdue for our ice age. So not to scare anyone, but we should technically be going into a colder section, and we should be creating maybe some more glaciers. So hopefully we don't ever lose all the glaciers, because if they all melted, our sea level would rise about 70 meters, which is a lot. We'd lose a lot of land. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for that great question. Before I duck out, any more questions?
One more question.
Go for it.
How big can the glaciers get there? What was the biggest glacier?
The biggest glacier. There is a really, really big glacier in Antarctica, and it's the biggest one. And I've forgotten the name off the top of my head, but it's part of what's called an ice sheet. So there's two different types of glaciers. There's alpine glaciers, which are found in mountains and valleys. And then there's ice sheets, which are really big land masses of glaciers. So things like Greenland and Antarctica are ice sheets. And Antarctica itself is probably the biggest glacier mass. So ice sheets are anything bigger than 50,000 kilometers squared, which is a really big area.
Very, very big. Absolutely. All right. Thanks, grade 6s. Great questions. All right. Let's duck over to YouTube. We'll take a question or two from there, and then we'll see if we can wrap up with a couple more questions from our camera classrooms. So you mentioned at the beginning we had a glaciologist join us. So there's a question here. Are there any glaciologists that work in the park?
Not in our park, unfortunately. They're really far and few between, and most glaciologists actually work for universities, or they're doing lots of studies right now to see what's happening with climate change and the glaciers.
All right. Another question here is about ice cores. Are there ever samples taken of the glaciers ice cores.
Yeah, definitely. So we actually got given a really big section of pictures we could have used during this presentation. And one of them was a really cool example of ice core. So they actually drilled down using a really kind of this big of a drill. And they kind of can figure out what's been happening with the ice based on the different layers. Kind of like if you look at rock layers and figure out when things have happened with those.
Yeah, and a lot of those samples that we have pictures were from studies done on the Yellow Silhouette Glacier.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And those ice cores are could be other really cool clues, kind of looking back at the climate in the past and understanding a little bit more about what things might have been like thousands and thousands of years ago. Very, very cool. Yeah. Okay. So another question here. This is grade 5 class, Miss Hoglin's crew. And they're wondering, how does a glacier kind of start initially? What kind of triggers that formation?
That's a really good question. It actually just forms by snow building up over however long. So when enough snow builds up, it actually starts to compress down. And when it builds up enough snow, which is about 50 meters, it squishes down with enough pressure to form ice. And the reason that glaciers are blue and not any other color is because it's actually squished out all of the air particles. So it's just a solid chunk of ice.
All right. One more question here from YouTube. The birds that are able to open those pine cones, are their numbers decreasing as the trees are decreasing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the Clark's nutcracker, their numbers are not decreasing because they have other food sources as well. So they can eat the seeds of ponderosa pines, lodgepole pine, and Douglas fir seeds. So they prefer the white bark pine seeds, but they can rely on other trees as well.
All right, that's pretty lucky because there's some species that kind of are really dialed in on the food that they eat. And if they lose that one source, whereas some other ones who have a little bit more flexibility, they can kind of adapt a little bit better to those changing conditions. All right, well, let's wrap up with a couple questions from online. Give me a wave if we need to come back to your classroom. I think I see some grade 4s hanging out front and center. So let's start there. And then the awesome 3s are waving like crazy, so we can't leave them out. So go ahead, 4s.
How cold is the coldest glacier and which one is it?
That's a good question.
I actually don't know the answer, but glaciers can actually stay at 0 degrees Celsius and they can still be frozen ice. But the coldest one, I guess it depends on the coldest area. So probably Antarctica, do you know how cold it gets up there?
I know it's been below 50, I think, minus 50.
Yeah, so I wouldn't want to be outside filming on that glacier for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Are there ever like 6 pines in a bunch?
Yeah, good question. No, not normally. You only find the 5 needles together in a bunch. Sometimes you'll see the needles missing, so you might see 4 or 3, but generally, yeah, just 5 in a bundle. So.
All right, thanks, grade 4s. We've been asked this question before, so I knew the coldest temperature ever recorded was somewhere around minus 80. It's actually minus 89.2 degrees Celsius in Antarctica. That was back in 1983.
Wow.
Yeah. So it can get pretty cold in a few places on the planet. Awesome 3s. Home. Let's get a question.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back. Sorry, we're eating our lunch at the same time.
No worries.
Kaylee has a question.
What's the rarest pine tree?
Could you say that again? Water?
The rarest pine tree.
The rarest
pine tree.
Rarest pine tree. That's a good question. I would guess it's probably a bristlecone pine. They're found in the US and they grow really high up in the mountains as well. And they can live up to 7,000 years old. And I'd say that's probably the rarest one I know of, but there might be others.
Cool. Wesley, stand up, please.
All right, cool question.
Why do the beetles eat the pine trees?
Why do the beetles eat the pine trees?
Yeah, so they actually kind of bore underneath the bark and lay their eggs in the pine trees. So I don't know if they necessarily eat them, but that's how they reproduce, is kind of underneath the bark.
All right. I don't want to leave this question out because this is related to the beetle question. This just came in via YouTube, so I'm going to include it in here. The beetles, where did they come from in the first place?
Ooh.
Yeah, so pine beetles are a native species, actually. So it's always been around. It's been in BC and Alberta, but because of climate change, it's gotten a lot more prevalent and common in the forests, and it's spread a lot. So it's always been around, but there's just a lot more now than there used to be.
All right. Well, I want to start off with a huge shout out to all the classrooms who came in and joined us live today. All the classrooms sending in really cool questions via the chat. Thank you so much for joining in and checking out our detective adventure here today. I want to give a big shout out to all of our camera classrooms. It's always great to get a little sneak peek into your classrooms and then to hear the questions that are on your mind. Now, this series is going to continue. We still have a lot of events coming up in April, in May, so you don't want to miss out on those. I'm going to share a banner here if it'll pop up for me. There we go. exploringbytheseat.com/peak. And you can find those events. And then the following day, we always do the same event, but en français, for our classrooms across Canada. So do check out the rest of the events that are coming up and take a moment to register. To our team, Marian, Sabrina, and Ian, thank you so much for a really fun adventure and that amazing scenery, getting right out into the park and seeing some of those amazing landscapes that you guys are helping to protect.
You're welcome.
And thanks for having us.
Always a pleasure to come on here.
All right, classrooms. A few have ducked out for recesses. We still have a couple hiding out back there. Give us a big wave. Thank you so much for participating. We can't wait to see you in another live event. But for today, we've got to say goodbye and sign out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.